Howdy of you delicious people. I'm here today to review more Power Rangers in Space, episodes 10, 11, and 12. So, I know that this may not be the most, popular season to probably get into. I know there's probably much more recent stuff that people will enjoy, and I'm just kind of going back through this for whatever reason, but heck, freaking, you know what? Eventually, once I get through Power Rangers in Space, eventually I'm going to visit other seasons and maybe finish up certain other seasons that eventually I know I need to probably get back into. But I'm just kind of enjoying Power Rangers in Space for there's some episodes where there are some goofy things. Like within these three episodes, there's to be one spot where all of a sudden the Megazord is to have a shield for seemingly an episode, bizarrely, as if they called for it, never. And then all of a sudden, they have a sword and a shield, and then all of a sudden it changes to instead of them having the sword, all of a sudden they have blaster out of nowhere. They have the little ship blaster thing. I'm like, wait a minute, that wasn't there before. How is it all of a sudden it's there now? Because they didn't call for it or they didn't whatever. But I guess it's just hey, it's just like RoboCop. They just exchange the things just continuously. Man, wouldn't that be freaking cool to have a Megazord that kind of had a RoboCop kind of thing where there's parts of the Zords would have certain kind of weapons or certain kind of pieces to where it would just be interchanging to just be you would have this arm that would have this dagger, or you would have this leg piece that has this blaster. Man, just kind of copying and pasting, seeming to have it like RoboCop, but it would be coming from the entire body. Maybe you just have a neck piece that just sploos out, and all of a sudden, hey, there's another there's another weapon just kind of falling out of this Zord's ears. I don't know. But it would be kind of interesting to also have a flinging kind of dagger for a Zord. That'd be kind of cool thing to do. Just so that way you have something different that is to be done with these things. I remember there was some times where the Mastodon was to be kind of like a shield sometimes. So that was kind of interesting to eventually play with at some points. But so let's get into these episodes. So honestly, episode 10 is just Cassie is such a good-looking woman. Don't get me wrong. The woman who is to play Cassie in this show, she's a beautiful woman. But there are some times when I see that it's a Cassie-heavy episode, I'm just like, oh no. There might not be a good story to behold here. And really, episode 10 isn't one of them. So episode 11 gives us the Phantom Ranger, which we all know what eventually happens with the Phantom Ranger and his identity that may eventually get revealed in some comic book somewhere, because I know supposedly they're going into comic books, they're going and doing some lore about the Phantom Ranger, but I don't still believe they ever completely said who the Phantom Ranger was, which really, it doesn't make sense anymore to, especially with the comic books, have the Phantom Ranger be Billy, because supposedly the Phantom Ranger has been working with Zordon for thousands of years, so it doesn't make sense for it to be Billy anymore. Or it doesn't make sense for also the Phantom Ranger to have been the spirits of all the other dead Rangers from past seasons. That seems like the weirdest thing to do. And also, Tommy has come back. So, unless it's Trini, which, man, would that be a really sweet, surprise, where it's, Trini, and, oh my god, it's the spirit of Trini. Because we never have seen her. It would be a cool thing if they did Trini. But then again, it would also be cool if it was Zordon's son, because makes sense, maybe. But If anyways, I have a whole story about like talking about that on Power Rangers Concepts, where I'm just kind of like playing with stuff that I don't really exactly know every single minute microscopic detail about, like I probably will with these episodes. So, and then the very last episode is to be this like monster mash kind of episode where we just have a bunch of monsters just collected together with not a great story, but like reasonably just good enough because we have a ton of monsters in one episode. I will not go and mention every single monster name. Like I'll just say all these monsters are in this area, and doesn't it look cool? Because yes, it does. I love a heavy amount of monsters in one episode. God, like I thoroughly enjoy those kind of episodes because a lot of times it's usually like an anniversary episode or it's a holiday episode or there's some reason for this episode to be put together. And I'm like, yeah, freaking like stack the deck. Stack the deck, introduce, like, forcibly have to introduce and have the Power Rangers have to either desperately call for help or something. Like, have them introduce other Rangers because they're desperately outnumbered, or they have to go and have, like, a freaking Delta Megazord being introduced into this season because for one episode they're to be technically outnumbered, which was great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Delta Megazord looks kind of cool. Kind of reminds me of the Zeo Zord, the red Zeo Zord with his kind of like Gatling guns. Which it's good that I actually remember what that actually was because normally I wouldn't remember what that actually word is. So let's go into it. Let's go into the spoiler times of these episodes. Thank you for ever watching any of these reviews. Thank you for being a part of this. I hope to eventually go into a season people will eventually also want to hear more about. Because, like, hey, like, everything is a slow roll. And plus, also, like, Power Rangers in space, like, really, somebody would just, like, dude, I already know everything about Power Rangers in space. But freaking F it. Like, I loved Power Rangers in space, and I always just kept kind of pinging at it that I didn't cover, like, Power Rangers in space when I said like, man, I really love I love Mighty Morphin, SPD, and In Space, and Dino Thunder, and like Dino Fury is just okay with the later seasons. Like I love the Dino Fury concept of the whole knights and the whole dinosaur thing. That won me over because dinosaurs and knights are cool, but I don't want to see them have a mashup of every season of two different things because they can't come up with stuff anymore, obviously. Where it's just like, just smash things together now. That's all we're going to do. Just smash crap together and see what happens. See what people like. So, with that said, if I haven't already, let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I get to spoil. Let's rock it. What does he do? What do they do? Do they like have to like say let's rock it and they put there is one point where Selwyn Ward was to say let's rock it and I thought they were gonna morph, but all of a sudden they just jump into the little slide tube things. And here's my question. Where do the tubes actually go? Do they just like fall onto some part of some pillow somewhere? Because that does nothing? Do they just like smash into a freaking like do they just fall back into like where do they go? Where do they actually go on set? Do they just kind of like fall and they just like whatever? Like I want to know. Like, God, if only I knew, like, any number of these characters, just ask them that weird question, that they would just look at me and just be like, why do you care? Where do they go from the shoot thing? Where do they go from the shoot thing? I want to know. Where do they shoot out from? Like, it obviously isn't in space. It's obviously in some kind of, like, Yeah, every single time we smack into this pillow, this giant pillow, every time we go through those chutes, or it's just some slip and dip and slide that eventually uh, they come from the bottom of it and just like, man, look at us. So let's go into it. Let's get into spoilers. So episode 10, because I think this is the real reason why I'm avoiding talking about the episodes, because episode 10 is to have a character called Waspicable, and Waspicable for some reason in my brain looks very familiar. Like, I think Waspicable, I'm like, wasn't there a villain that looked like this in some other episode of Power Rangers? Am I wrong to assess that? It just feels like this looks something like a Mighty Morphin Power Ranger villain, but I could be wrong. I'm just like, this looks so familiar, but not from this episode. So, we have this character called Waspicable who is tied to this character called Sting King. And Waspicable is trying to learn how to be a villain because Sting King is doing such a bang up job that Sting King has plenty of on screen time, correct? No. One, speaking of screen time, like, this is, of course, another, like, hey, somebody's on vacation this week episode where Cassie is to be the real, just, I'm here, but no one else is. Even Cassie has some pretty decent screen time in this episode, and I was just like, man, Cassie, freaking, like, one, great shape, by the way, Cassie. Looking great in this episode. She looks awesome. Like, they freaking got rid of those pigtails. Thank goodness, because I could not buy Cassie with the whole pigtail thing. Thank God that only happened that one episode. But Cassie looks great in this episode. The actress that played Cassie, not Cassie, because you know what I mean. There's a difference. Somebody looks good, and somebody looks good on screen, and whichever. Pushing on. I'm wasting too much time. So, we find out in this episode of Power Rangers in Space that Waspicable is to be a monster that is not wanting to be an evilish person. If anything, he is to force himself to want to do evilish things, but then decides how horrible it is, and he's like, no, I can't go and attack an old man. And so Waspicable is forced by Ecliptor to go and break up this birthday party and go and beat up Cassie. And so Waspicable is just like, I don't know about this. But then all of a sudden we have the Quantrons, or whatever the henchmen of this episode usually are. Please let it be Quantrons. This is going to take forever. Yes, it is. Let's go with Quantrons, because I freaking will know the name of that. We also get a point where Cassie is to morph, and Cassie is fighting out this Waspicable, and Waspicable ends up getting this the weapon away from Cassie to blast her. And we just have this moment where Cassie is just like stone stead there, and she could have ran away. But Waspicable is just like, I don't know if I should blast you with your own weapon, your satellite stunner, your like whatever goofy weapon, the satellite weapon. Waspicable goes and doesn't blast the Pink Ranger, and the Pink Ranger's confused. She's like, whoa, this is a monster with a conscience. How is this happening? So, eventually this birthday is get ruined, and I know I'm kind of going this and doing this episode in a very roundabout way, because really I'm just like, this episode. So Waspicable is to go have all the Quantrons just start to destroy this birthday, cakes and faces and all kinds of things. So the balloons are to go off, and all of a sudden we have this girl who's like, "Oh, my balloon!" And I'm like, "Oh my god, this is like Spider-Man 2 flashbacks from that video game. Where's my balloon?" And Spider-Man is like crawling up the wall, just saying, "Shut up, kid, I'll get the balloon for you." So, here's a goofy thing though. At the very end of the episode, Despicable goes and tries to get the balloons back, and that's what's gonna make the girl happy, that she has her balloons. I'm like, hey man, like, fix all this that you just broke. Fix my entire birthday party, especially those gifts parts. Like, fix all my gifts so all my gifts aren't broken, right? Because if any one of my gifts are broken, I'm gonna come to you to return those. You're gonna have to fork up some dough, right? Me, that's for sure. So, Despicable is to eventually see this all carnage going on and see that the Pink Ranger is outnumbered. And so now, like, we have it where, like, Cassie is going to get, like, stabbed, I think, by Ecliptor or one of the Quantrons or something like that. This episode is one of those where I'm just like, oh, great, I have to talk about this one. But again, Cassie, thumbs up. You look great. You look great in this episode. So does Andros, Selwyn Ward, Carlos, Ashley, TJ, because they're basically barely in this episode. I think they demorph in this episode, right? Because, like, anyways. So, Despicable goes and takes the hit for Cassie, and eventually, like, we have it where everybody's just kind of, like, baffled about a monster who is to have a conscience. So, like, if we don't play like a monster turns good, then we also have to, in episodes later, we have to turn a good guy into an evil, monstrous thing, because that's what we're supposed to do in these episodes. Good guy turns evil, evil turns good. It's a weird mix of things. I think it's a good idea to eventually have an evil character turn good. I like that concept of things, but, like, I can't help but also think that, like, why wouldn't all the evil characters just turn good? Because they're basically always on the losing side of things. They're just basically waiting for that Megazord blade to just hit them and calling it a day wherever they're to freaking go after they die every single episode. But eventually they'll come back because, like, when you need a big, huge event episode where you need a bunch of monsters, might as well. So, eventually what ends up happening in this episode is, of course, they end up Megazording it up, and because they have to go and fight against Sting King, because Sting King is the real villain in this episode, even though he doesn't have enough screen time. So I think this is the episode where they end up, instead of actually blading him, they use the blaster on him, but, like, sword and shield, but then blaster. Okay, sure. That takes him down, and so now we have the Power Rangers demorphed, who are just kind of curious what Despicable is going to do. And so Despicable goes and gets the balloons for the girl, and they're like, maybe he's changed his spades after all. What is he going to do after this? Maybe he'll become a Power Ranger himself. Despicable will become a Power Ranger himself. Why can't there be a Power Ranger that doesn't have an identity, and then you find out that it's Despicable in the later episodes? Man, would that just be a goofy story for me to not care about? Like, oh, it's Despicable? Oh, great. This is great. It's great that they called back to that episode. So, really just the next episode is, because I'm kind of, like, spitting quickly fast through that episode, because I just didn't really want to talk about it. It's just a goofy episode that, of course, has everyone on vacation again for most of the Power Rangers until they demorph or whatever. So, the next episode is actually to be a good episode where we have, of course, the Phantom Ranger, who is at this planet called Herculon. I think I'm ill pronouncing that. Herculon, Herculon, something like that, something close. Hopefully. So the Phantom Ranger, who is to be around, Divatox and the Pranatrons, who are going and collecting Zordon. The Dark Spectre is somewhere in the sky, like giving demands. Eventually, also, Andromeda is also on Herculon also, and because she'll arrive to eventually help out Divatox and her Piranatrons, because evidently one Swift Ranger just like, man, let's get everybody in there. Here's my problem with this episode. The Phantom Ranger in this episode just looks so weak. Just so weak. Man, like, is it the heat? Because, good God, man, just so weak. Like, he doesn't really get much of anything to do. Like, there's this one spot where he's to, like, try to get up, and he's to, like, hit this Piranatron in a goofy way, which just looks like he just kind of, like, slaps him aside just because, like, it feels like he's trying to get up. And I'm sure, God, wherever they probably were, like, I'm sure the Phantom Ranger was like, dude, I'm freaking dying in this thing. Get me the F out of here, out of this suit. It's freaking too hot in this. Like, I bet, like, the Phantom Ranger was just dying from dehydration. Because, good God, like, that thick suit, in that, unless they had, like, the cooling mechanisms in the Power Ranger suit, where, like, how, like, in the more recent RoboCop movie, the 2014 one, like, they had a cooling suit inside there, but I'm thinking they didn't for this guy. But I could just imagine any other monster or whatever just doing, like, dude, freaking, I don't know how many times I just keeled over from dehydration. I'm like, yeah, like, I would probably be easily a person that would just be keeling over because I'm just like, dude, I'm freaking, like, dehydrated as F. Like, I don't know how many times I would just be wearing, like, a tank top and shorts, and I'm like, dude, I'm freaking feeling dehydrated, like, severely. I don't know what it is. It's just freaking hot as a motherfucker in my life. So, let's get into this episode. So, the Phantom Ranger is to spot that Zordon is in Herculon, and so the Phantom Ranger is to make this message that is not in crystal clear HD, because why would it? It's a freaking message. It's like Princess Leia sending his message out, or her sending her message out to whoever. And plus, also, we had that Princess Leia moment towards the end of the episode where Phantom Ranger is not actually there. He's just like, hey guys, I went after, like, I just went off. Like, because freaking, I'm not going to stay in this place any gosh darn more to sweat my my spandex off. So I'm just going to give this message and I'm going to be peacing out. Because freaking, it's tired. I'm tired of wearing all this and, like, having to just, like, forcibly do all this stuff. It's just exhausting. But yeah, so Phantom Ranger sends this message and all of a sudden has to fight all these Piranatrons. And so, like, Phantom Ranger is to, like, rustle for this gun to fire off this message as this flare thing that is to be sent out to the Power Rangers. The Power Rangers receive it, and so they're like, okay, like, let's go full blast to Herculon. And so they go full blast to Herculon, and so they go down there and they try to help out the Phantom Ranger, who is just kind of like, he is just, like, slugging it around, because freaking that crap, I'm sure, is just like, God, I'm just baking in here. I don't know how many times that I've gone into semi-trucks and it feels like an oven in there. And then there's some times where it feels like a refrigerator. So I can understand somewhat close to eventually, like, a person having to wear that stuff for numerous hours. And you're just like, hey, what's baking? Probably me. I think I'm baking. This helmet is just burning my head. I bet that's probably what happens, because it's just like, bah! So let's get into it. So eventually the Power Rangers show up to help the Phantom Ranger, and so the Phantom Ranger is to tell Andros about the Delta Megaship. Here's this weird iPod of a thing. Here you go. Here you go, Andros. Here's this Delta thing that has this disc on it. Here you go. This one's for you. And so Andromeda is to get a message from Dark Spectre to have Andromeda go and distract the Power Rangers by sending a monster onto Earth, which that monster is actually to be Crocodile. We have it to where Crocodile ends up doubling himself, which I'm like, yeah, like have 20 different crocodiles, and they have to just like slice through every one of them with Megazord. Just have to just like have the Megazord forcibly have like a Megazord bomb that they just have to just like we have to nuke this city. To kill the crocodiles. We have to take them all down and nuke the city. Like, evacuate. Evacuate the town. We need to bomb these crocodiles. We need to bomb them. We don't even care about any of the civilians. We're just gonna stomp on, like, we're just gonna just, like, be dancing all over and just, like, create these earthquakes with how many times we're gonna move around. So, all the other Power Rangers but Andros make their way back to Earth so they can go and defend it against the crocodiles and eventually go into the Astro Megazord and try to take these things down, but it's always, of course, difficult. So, Andros is to consistently be going off to find this Delta Megazord or Megaship. There we go. And he's getting like pointers from Phantom Ranger. I'm like, why not just send Phantom Ranger with you? Did anybody think of that? Like, hey, Phantom Ranger, how about you just go into my Galaxy Glider and we just both shove off to where the Delta Megaship is. You can tell me exactly what to do. But no, Andros is going by himself. And so he's getting pointers of where, like, he should go, and he's still, like, freaking confused, because why wouldn't you be? So Andros is to go into this one room that feels like a battle room or a war room, where there's a whole bunch of computers everywhere. Andros is like, okay, Phantom Ranger, I have the disc. What do I do with this? And the Phantom Ranger is just like, dehydrated Andros. Send water. Please. So, Phantom Ranger is toast. And so, Andros is now like, I have 2 holes here. Where's the CD player, Phantom Ranger? Where's the CD player? So, there's 2 different holes. And so, Andros just puts it into this one thing, like thinking, hopefully this is right. And luckily it is. More than likely, probably either one of the slots probably should have worked either way, you would think. But, So Andros puts the thing into the slot. All of a sudden, the Delta Megaship goes into battle mode, and Andros is like, yeah! And then all of a sudden he has this, like, the Delta Megaship's, wrist thing that he can call and give him commands, which is pretty sweet. So now the Delta Megaship makes it back to Earth, and so Andros goes back to the Megazord, but is also controlling the Megaship also. So like the Megaship is just decking freaking the crocodiles, just like one little like spray of Delta Megaship bullets. And these crocodiles are toast. Like, just one little, like, shot out, and, like, these crocodiles are dead. So, they quickly head back to where the Phantom Ranger was, and Phantom Ranger is just like, dude, I'm just gonna leave a message for them. I'm peacing out. So, they go all the way back to Herculon just to get a message. And then they go back and leave because, like, Zordon had went off on this ship, and so like they're basically just shifting Zordon from place to place to place, but then the Phantom Ranger will eventually try and find it. Maybe. Really what the very last episode is to be is for the Power Rangers to have Bulk and Skull and the Professor eventually concoct this evil ray where there's to be this good side of something and then the evil side. I'm like, what are they going to create? Annabelle? Because I see the movie Annabelle, and are they going to create like a possessed item? Wouldn't that have been interesting to eventually have in an episode of Power Rangers where all of a sudden you have Bulk and Skull's character who just accumulates a bunch of evil items, and they're kind of like the Conjuring priest and his wife, and then all of a sudden all these items just get out of control one day, and then you all of a sudden just have to have an episode where like all these possessed items just become monsters, and then the Power Rangers just have to like Megazord and slice through them. Man, I'm coming up with some sweet, delicious freaking Power Rangers episodes that will never happen. Because why would you go into possessed demon territory, the Power Rangers episode? Because you just beat monsters just all the time and just create monsters randomly. So, in this episode, this last episode, Bulk and Skull and the Professor to go and do this evil ray to create this robotic thing to chase after Bulk and Skull. But bizarrely, we have Andromeda, who is to look at Bulk and Skull's idea, and it's like, you know what? We need to do something with that. And I'm like, wait a minute. If Andromeda is to get some cues from Bulk and Skull and the Professor, man, are they desperate for ideas for these villains. Good God, how is it that Andromeda is such a smart gal that she has to rely on a thing that Bulk and Skull was to do? Is that like the lowest of the low for them? Or they just can't, like, hey man, we've come up with too many monsters and they all lose. Like Dark Spectre was to threaten Andromeda, if you fail one more time, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna take, and I'm just gonna crush your dark fortress while you're sleeping. You probably should sound more Andromeda, I'm gonna take you and just crush your dark force. That probably sounds more like Malagor. Oh, I mean Dark Spectre, right? Malagor! I love Malagor! I don't like Dark Spectre. F that guy. I like Malagor. Anyways, pushing on. So now, Andromeda is taking cues from Bulk and Skull because somebody's learning. And so they end up using an evil ray, and so I think the first thing that they try is on Ashley's Galaxy Glider, because Iandros and Ashley are going and Galaxy gliding it up. And so we have a Velocifighter that is going and flying behind both Ashley and Andros as they're having fun. And because they went off to some planet where the gravity was so heavy that Ashley just fell because supposedly she slipped on a banana because she's yellow and banana, get it, it's a joke. But no, the gravity was just so heavy on the planet that they were on, I guess, to try to find where Zordon was. But so they go and they Galaxy glide it up, and so Andros is like flipping from one part of space to the other, and just like, hey, look at all the cool stuff I can do with my Galaxy Glider. And Ashley's like, yeah, look what I can do. I can go and have my Galaxy Glider just lose control because of Velocifighter. Now I'm just hanging on to it and desperately having Andros kind of like grab his hand to me, and then all of a sudden we have this moment where Andros and Ashley are now on the same glider, and he's like holding her like her side, and then they're flying off. So I'm trying to see if there's anything left that I don't think there is. Uh, like I think I'm perfectly fine without having to know some kind of random knowledge of this last one. So they test it and they're like, okay, this seems to work. So now we're gonna try it on something bigger, which I would have thought would have been a Power Ranger. Wouldn't it have been cool to have an evil Power Ranger on the show? Like I think we've done like any other thing for I don't know how long. Like, how about we just have an evil Power Ranger? I miss evil Power Rangers. I can't wait for the moment till eventually we get Psycho Rangers, because I think Psycho Rangers were always cool. And I don't think they had enough time in the sun. I also know about a Mega Rangers where supposedly I think Zach, Trini, and Jason like turned into Mega Rangers, which everybody says, man, the designs of those characters look mwah, sweet. And I would say, yeah, like I saw like a YouTube clip of the Omega Rangers. I'm like, pretty cool, pretty awesome looking. Um, but I just saw it through a YouTube video. I don't have the comic in hand. And like, oh, I know all the story now. Great. So, of what happened. Just kind of cliff notes. Anyways, pushing on. So, sorry about the whole vagueness of this, but freaking, like, we're only at 26 or 36 minutes. Isn't everyone proud of me? I usually would take like 50 years to go through every episode. I'm going through these ones a little bit quicker because there isn't a whole lot of, there isn't side stories because it's all just Power Ranger stuff. It's compiled Power Ranger stuff because I think a lot of people are taking vacations during this time period, which freaking they work hard. So give them a freaking break. Give them a break. They work hard most of the time when they're demorphed and they're having to punch and kick people. Working hard, man. And also the people in the masks and the freaking people that have like 1,200 pounds of freaking costume to just have to freaking mangle through every gosh darn day. Give them a break. Give them $20. Just say, here's for your hard work. Some $20. Just $20, man. It's only $20. Anyways, so pushing on. Where was I? I don't know. Let's get there. So, so, God, now I completely lost where I was in the episode. Oh, so instead of going and doing a Power Ranger, they decide to take the Delta Mega Ship and make it evil for this episode. And here's also the things. The Power Rangers are going up against a cluster of villains that, like, one was, of course, the, I think one of them was the Claw Hammer, I think, from one of the other episodes. And, man, I love that one Rhino freaking monster. I don't know where that's from. Probably one of the episodes that I forgot about. Like, all these monsters actually looked really cool, but, like, I don't remember them. If they were all from this season, I wouldn't know. I would just naturally assume they're from some other season, but they aren't. And we also have the Sting monster from the other episode that was just to be the prior episode, which is to be Sting King. There we go. I'm trying to, like, I didn't want to go through the notes, but I forgot who that character was already because I want to forget about that episode. So now eventually these monsters are to Megazord up, and seemingly every single one of them are to, like, be large in size. And so all of a sudden, the Power Rangers use both Megazord and Delta Megazord. But then we end up finding out that the Delta Megazord turns evil. I'm like, dude, they already have enough problems with, like, a huge chunk of monsters to just have the Delta Megazord or the Delta Megaship to also be evil? I'm sorry, but that seems like the stupidest writing that I've ever seen in a show, because you could focus so much on all the monsters and having to fight them out and having to take them down and just like, yeah, freaking have a ton of fights with all these monsters. And it feels like they skip through all of this, like I am doing right now, to really just marinate on the time of, God, how many monsters do we have? And how much screen time do these monsters really have in these scenes? I'm just like, like, why can't we have like just a full-on episode where they marinate on the time, all these monsters being together, and freaking like we have this back and forth battle for 20 some odd minutes? Just the beginning of the episode is monsters arrive. The end of the episode is the Power Rangers deck them all, and just spend the whole episode on that. Don't do any stupid evil Ray thing. Don't spend time with Ashley and Andros going on their galaxy gliders. No. Freaking the whole episode, Power Rangers versus monsters, and then just spend a whole episode on that. That there's too many monsters, and they have to go and they have to save the city, and they're outnumbered, and then they have to eventually send something in to like help them because they just can't, they're outnumbered. That would have been a great episode, but that would have been a great way to open up the Delta Megaship, was to have this thing like having like, they could have done this in the last episode. They could have had it to where like, okay, since the Power Rangers are off world, have a ton of monsters all on Earth just wreaking havoc, and then the Power Rangers have to desperately come back and also get the Delta Mega ship to come in there and wipe all these monsters out, because they're like, God, like I wish we would have been back on Earth to defend our homeworld, but like we just couldn't. Like we like clearly like that would have been a great episode, but no, they went against it. So the Delta Megaship is evil, fighting against the Megazord or the Megaship or the the Megazord. So eventually, they have to figure out how exactly to reverse this ray, or to be able to come up with some kind of ray that turns the Delta Megaship back into the good side of things. And so all of a sudden, like they like keep spraying down this ray, and eventually they think that it works. So like Andros is just like, well, hey man, let's go and let's combine both Zords together to be the Delta Super Delicious Mega Ship thing, and blast through all these monsters and take them all off. I'm just like, man, there was such like a blatant waste of time in this episode, where it could have been more focused on Power Rangers blading through monsters, to just quickly just like have like a bajillion weapons coming out of nowhere flinging at these monsters to take them all down, and would have been a sweet frickin' just part of an episode. But instead, like we milk a story out of this. We milk a story. But speaking of milk, let me take a second to reset. Normally I'd pause, but I'm not going to do that. So that's how this episode is to really just break down and just be done. But the very last thing of this episode is to come back to Bulk and Skull and the Professor, who are still running after, or being people that are running from this evil robot, who is to eventually still like be coming after them with all kinds of dangerous weapons at its disposal, right? So Bulk, Skull, and the Professor to run off. episode 10 with Waspicable. There was a spot where, of course, Bulk and Skull and the Professor were to eventually go and think that a beehive was to be an alien. And so the professor is like trying to put his head next to this beehive. I'm like, oh my god. Like, this has gotta be just like, there's such goofy things, but you know what? Like, it was fun. There was some funny things going on here, but it was, but eventually they are to eventually realize that there's bees in there and they run off. To eventually be caught by the Waspicable, where like the guys just decide to go from one side of their van to the other, thinking that they'll be perfectly okay. And then Waspicable goes and gets onto the ground, is looking, and is seeing like, like it looks like they just went the old switcheroo. So Waspicable all of a sudden goes to the other side of the vehicle to find out that supposedly they have been scared out of their pants. So we just see all of a sudden like Bulk, Skull, and the Professor all kind of slowly but surely walking away with their boxers on. And I'm like, what is up with like Bulk and Skull and the Professor, like whatever, like being in their underwear through these episodes? What's up with this? But hey, like freaking hey, if a lot of these characters have to work out like all the time, or whatever, because rigorous things or whichever, maybe there isn't rigorous things to just be like, hey, like just have the same kind of haircut through a lot of these episodes and we'll be oakley dokley. So, because continuity, right? But I guess like Ashley has had a number of different hairstyles and whatever, and like so is technically Cassie. Andros is just like, hey man, I'm wearing a wig every single episode. Nah, whatever. The blonde and the long and the whichever. Anyways, so eventually we see the Power Rangers who are seeing Bulk and Skull and they're like, oh, like you guys need to just like get out of here, please. We don't see you in the underwears for another episode. So yeah, so that leads the Power Rangers going and trying to get after the Waspicable, but Waspicable is to supposedly be good, and the Power Rangers were just gonna blast it with their Astro Blasters, but the Pink Ranger was like, no, don't. Like, he's good. Like, I believe him. He's good. There's something about him. But yeah, so like I wanted to kind of, if there's anything that I probably forgot to cover in any of these episodes, yeah, like some of these episodes, like I think the Phantom Ranger was a good thing to just be like, yeah, Phantom Ranger's back. So I was just like, God, like they should have revealed who the Phantom Ranger was, but they never did, supposedly. I think that they probably want to keep that secret, but if there is a comic book that finally does reveal who that is, like, thank God. Because then we can just say that it was so-and-so character, but we could still make a story out of that. We could still make a, like, oh, it's so-and-so random person that who cares? Or it's all of a sudden, like, some relative of some character that doesn't quite make sense. Like, eventually, like, maybe there's still a story there. Probably will never happen in a million years because freaking, like, who is anyone to write anything? But I'm going to get out of here. I'm sorry it took way too long to do this review. I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.